MOM-TRENEUR, teen moms Kailyn Lowry to launch very unexpected new business for kids in native Delaware. It started like most modern celebrity side hustles, a whisper on social media, then a blurry Polaroid posted at midnight, then one short video captioned only with a silver star emoji. But what began as a mysterious tease from Kailyn Lowry, teen mom veteran, louder-than-life mom of four, podcast host, best-selling author, and occasional matrimonial weather vane, quickly became something Delawareans, and the internet, had never quite expected, a full-fledged children's enterprise rooted in Kailyn's native home state. This is not a nursery. Not a franchise of toy stores, not a line of influencer-approved baby wraps. It's not even a studio or a themed cafe where the latte foam doubles as a marketing prop. Kailyn's new project is weirder, braver, and, depending on whom you ask, either brilliantly subversive or utterly bonkers. She's calling it Playground Lab, Little Minds, Big Discoveries, working tagline, messy, meaningful, made in Delaware. And, in true Kailyn fashion, the announcement came wrapped in humor, hustle, and a family-shaped heart. Below, in long form, in vivid color, and with more imagined behind the scenes than a Bravo reunion, is the story of how a teen mom star reinvented play for kids in a place people often forget exists between the Jersey Turnpike and the Chesapeake Bay. Consider this an origin story, a business snapshot, and a love letter to the stick-a-fingered, laugh-until-you-cry, wildly hopeful space where parenthood and entrepreneurship collide. Kailyn Lowry has always been, at her core, a translator of chaos. The camera lights and confessional booths were only an outward layer. Inside, she's a person who tracks schedules in a cell phone calendar that looks like a Tetris masterpiece, who negotiates custody and school pickups with the same mental agility she uses to draft viral captions. She's also, and crucially, someone who remembers where she came from. Sussex County, Delaware, where the air smells of bay and barbecue, where town squares and water towers matter. The seed of Playground Lab was planted one afternoon during a particularly grueling week of morning routines, 2 birthday parties, and a podcast recording. Her youngest, the always expressive baby of the family, had been sent home from preschool with a report card that read, at the bottom, in serious teacher handwriting, needs more creative, hands-on engagement at home. Kailyn laughed and flipped the card over, but the laugh turned into a sigh. Kids need more than glossy apps and Zoom crafts, she thought. They need supervised chaos. They need experiments where grown-ups don't cry about the cleanup. They need a place that takes curiosity seriously but doesn't take kids seriously enough to take the fun out of it. She began to jot ideas in the margins of her notebook: sensory kitchen, mini maker's workshop, science for sticky fingers, calculus for kids? No, wait, curiosity for kids. The notes multiplied into sketches, sketches swelled into mood boards, and mood boards found their way to her phone camera. Kailyn didn't want a run-of-the-mill children's center. There are plenty of those. She wanted a place that felt like a cross between a DIY science fair, a community center, and that one extroverted aunt who brings glitter and glue to Thanksgiving and somehow the stuffing still tastes fine. She wanted something with a heart and a plan. A place where parents could drop off their kids for a few joyful hours of structured experimentation, and where kids left with real skills, not merely pottery with their handprint on the bottom. The location choice was partly sentimental and partly strategic. Delaware is small, sure, but it's stitched with neighborhoods desperate for accessible, affordable child enrichment. Kailyn could have launched a trademarked line of anything: leggings, planners, artisanal juice cleansers, and the world would have watched. But she chose Delaware because it felt like the right soil, known yet unnoticed, home but not the headline. The brand narrative she cooked up emphasized 2 things: local roots and radical inclusivity. The idea of native Delaware isn't a throwaway line. It's part of the mission. Kailyn wanted the business to employ local educators, pay living wages to staff, partner with nearby schools for aftercare, and build a sliding-scale membership system that didn't treat low-income families as tokens in a glossy PR campaign. The company's charter, yes, she made one, and yes, she read it on camera in a tiny sweater, included language about community reinvestment. 5% of profits would be funneled into summer scholarships, free weekend labs, and small grants for teacher innovation. People were skeptical. Online, some fans applauded the humanitarian edge. Others rolled their eyes. Kailyn sells everything now, said one comment, as if parenting expertise and entrepreneurial energy were mutually exclusive. Kailyn did not respond publicly. Instead, she met with former teachers, with a pediatric occupational therapist from Dover, and with the Wilmington Maker Collective that specialized in child-safe 3D printed toys. She learned fast. She listened faster. If you're imagining glitter everywhere and tiny hands covered in paint, you're not wrong. But Playground Lab is also something more precise, a modular, rotating program of hands-on experiences broken down into 4 main pillars. Maker Studio, a supervised workshop where kids aged 4 to 12 build things, simple circuits, cardboard-engineered toys, upcycled fashion, and introductory woodworking, sanded edges only, and always with an adult buddy. The Philosophy, making teachers problem-solving and resilience. Sensor Space, a sensory exploration zone for toddlers and preschoolers. Water tables, kinetic sand, textured tunnels, smell and sound boxes, and a quiet cloud nap nook. No pushy academics, just a laboratory for the senses. Kid Lab Science, an approachable snapshot of real-world science. Think vinegar volcanoes with safety glasses, plant dissection tables, and junior chemistry classes taught with theatricality and safety. The goal: demystify science and normalize lab-like curiosity. Civic Play, here's where the Delaware roots show, local history meets modern civics. Kids can run a mini-town council, design a public park, plan a community garden, or build tiny models of local landmarks. When she first described Civic Play to the advisory board, one educator teared up. Kids rarely get to see themselves as part of a living, breathing town, the educator said. Kailyn scribbled future citizens in large letters. Membership tiers rotate by week, with drop-in options for fluky schedules. There's an aftercare program with homework help and a lunch club that features rotating local food vendors, because Kailyn insisted that the snack menu should reflect the community. Also, there's a small retail nook that sells ethically made educational kits, patterned after the weekly labs. The kits are priced to be accessible. There are scholarships. There are free open days. Kailyn's aesthetic choices were a deliberate rebuke to the harsh white minimalism of some children's centers. Kids are kaleidoscopes, she told the design team. Let's not make the space feel like an adult's Instagram grid. The interior design merges reclaimed wood, vibrant ceramics, and whimsical murals painted by local artists who used to make t-shirts for dive bars. There's a mural of a giant red crab, an homage to the Chesapeake, that also functions as a climbing wall. The library corner is rounded like a seashell. The sensory tables are modular and easy to clean. Branding, too, reflects a tension between polished vision and joyful mess. The logo is a simple, hand-drawn beaker with a swing as the handle. The tagline, Little Minds, Big Discoveries, sits next to it in a font that looks slightly off-kilter, as if it were written by a kid who'd just learned cursive. Merchandise is intentionally unslick: canvas tote bags, patch-stitched aprons, and vinyl art prints by local illustrators. No glossy influencer merch. Kailyn joked in an early press Q&A, "I don't want kids wearing sweaters that say Playmaker and then crying at the first spilled smoothie." She hired community-focused marketing folks, not PR glossy types. Their first campaign, Lab Days, featured hyperlocal stories: a small-town beekeeper teaching kids about pollinators, a retired seamstress teaching sewing basics, and a middle school robotics team mentoring younger kids. Social media content emphasized process over product, showing failed experiments as necessary detours, and kid-authored explanations on camera. "You'd be amazed what a 7-year-old's voiceover sounds like," she said, grinning. Of course, nothing celebrity-adjacent escapes controversy. The announcement prompted a chorus of armchair critics questioning whether Kailyn was merely repackaging privilege. Some asked whether the sliding scale would actually be enforced or hidden behind application forms and waiting lists. Others wondered whether a reality TV star could meaningfully run an evidence-based curriculum. Kailyn invited the critiques, publicly and privately. In a live Q&A on her podcast, she read skeptics' comments aloud and answered them, not with corporate platitudes but with specific policies. She posted the sliding scale application process in full, with examples of income bands and an explanation of how the scholarship committee would work. She invited members of the community to serve on the board overseeing bursary distribution. It wasn't perfect. Nothing is. But it felt like an attempt at transparency. The more significant controversies were philosophical. Some early advisors pushed for a heavy focus on STEM, convinced that the brand needed a crisp EDU startup sheen to succeed. Others argued for a softer emphasis on play and process. Kailyn navigated the tension with something she's gotten good at: translating personal experience into institutional policy. "When I was a kid, I learned from making mistakes I could touch," she told the board. If a robot falls over 5 times and then stands up, the kid learns more than if you hand them a trophy for showing up. She also refused to make the enterprise exclusionary or prestige-laden. No VIP memberships. No influencer nights. "We're not a club," she said in an interview. We're a lab. Kailyn's hiring process reads like a curated soup of local talent and professional educators. She recruited a former museum educator as head of curriculum, a pediatric physical therapist to design sensory programs, and a chef who had pivoted into child nutrition. She also hired several local college students as program assistants, both to give them part-time income and to grow an ecosystem around the space. The curriculum, which Kailyn insists on calling a framework, emphasizes 3 learning outcomes: curiosity, collaboration, and craftsmanship. Sessions are designed to last 45 to 90 minutes, with clear objectives but leeway for improvisation. For example, a maker studio session on bridges might begin with an engineer's explanation of load, move into a collaborative building project with popsicle sticks and recycled cans, and finish with a reflective circle where kids say what failed and what they'd change. KidLab Science focuses on replicable experiments so children can repeat them at home. Sensor Space rotates textures and safe edible sensory items so toddlers aren't stuck in the same stimuli. Kailyn also insisted on an aunt-approved portion of the curriculum, a single adult at the center of every session who's allowed and encouraged to be silly. No grim-faced authority figures. If an experiment calls for dancing to cool down a frustrated kid, so be it. If glue needs to be licked off a finger, not advised, but reality, the adult makes a joke that diffuses tension. Her logic is simple. Kids who laugh are less likely to cling to failure. Opening day arrived with weather that refused to behave, a drizzle that made the town smell like wet paper and a forecast promising sun by noon. The first families arrived early, clutching thermoses and tiny backpacks. The building's ribbon cutting was done with safety scissors and a ceremonial beaker filled with blue punch. There were local dignitaries, but also straight-up neighbors who'd watched the lot sit empty for years, assuming it was doomed. For many, this felt like a little restoration. Inside, the maker studio looked like a tiny revolution. A dozen kids, helmets glittering, hammering away on recycled wood. In Sensor Space, a toddler named Eli discovered that the water table could be a portal to small world play, and then discovered that splashing was an excellent way to make grown-ups laugh. In KidLab Science, a group of 8-year-olds made slime and then measured its tensile strength using a modified pulley. 2 of them high-fived and declared themselves slime engineers. The Civic Play Corner had a paper map of Delaware and a small army of kids proposing solutions for traffic on Route 1. One suggested hoverboards, another suggested more ice cream trucks, which, to be honest, is not a bad urban planning idea. Kailyn watched from the edge of the action, a cup of coffee going cold in her hand. She took a few calls, smiled at the chaos, and, crucially, let the facilitators do their jobs. She'd hired well. The staff were calm but energized. They'd prepared snack stations with labeled allergens, had a quiet room for overstimulated kids, and a small first aid kit labeled with hand-drawn stickers. Nothing about the center felt like celebrity, it felt like a new neighborhood institution. Let's be real, a business must make money. Kailyn's team structured Playground Lab with a hybrid model. Memberships provide steady income, monthly plans for frequent users and pass-based options for families who attend sporadically. Drop-in pricing is intentionally lower than comparable private enrichment centers. Corporate partnerships, with local businesses, libraries, and small museums, provide in-kind support and help with outreach. The retail nook and branded kits drive some margin, and community events, Friday family nights, maker markets, bring in additional revenue. Most importantly, the math works because Kailyn was willing to take a slower growth approach. She didn't franchise on day one. She resisted the siren call of quick brand licensing and instead focused on a single, replicable model. The idea is to perfect the Delaware prototype, then, if it's successful, expand to similar-sized towns, not to carve the world into Kailyn Lowry bubblegum playhouses. There's pride in the plan, slow, sustainable, community-rooted growth. Starting a business is a messy thing, especially when your personal life is live-streamed by millions. Kailyn has known public scrutiny for years. The custody hearings, the cosmetic speculation, the rumor columns, the praise. Launching Playground Lab required emotional labor of a different kind. There were nights she cried quietly in her car after a long day of auditions and stakeholder calls. There were logistical headaches, contracts, insurance, zoning permits. There were also the quieter tests, explaining to her eldest why she was late for soccer because of inventory deliveries, or fashioning a cardboard prototype of a sensory toy during her son's math tutoring. But the payoffs were the soft, bright kind. Watching a 5-year-old beam because she'd built a bridge that held a small toy bus changed something in Kailyn. "I'm scared my kids will inherit my restlessness," she told an interviewer in the weeks after the launch. But the goal is that they inherit curiosity and joy. That's what this place is about. Her kids were present in small ways. A cameo as official taste testers for the snack menu, a few early photo ops where they helped paint a mural. Kailyn guarded their privacy fiercely. The center's marketing used local children only with parental consent and often relied on stock images for broader promo. The business was hers, but the mission was for the community. Within months, Playground Lab became a microhub. A retired postal worker taught a class on maps and stamps. A local carpenter ran a weekend for teens wanting to learn tool safety. Teachers from nearby schools sent students on field trips. Family support groups met in the basement. The center's civic programs partnered with the county library to create a Young Leaders course, and the scholarship fund began placing kids in summer sessions whose parents couldn't otherwise afford enrichment. Kailyn's fame accelerated interest, but it was the staff's day-to-day work that cemented the center's reputation. Parents began to notice qualitative changes, increased curiosity in homework, more confident social skills, and a willingness to fail publicly and try again. "My daughter used to avoid anything that seemed hard," one parent wrote in an online community post. "Now she makes prototypes of all her ideas and is less afraid of being wrong." There were also economic ripples. A small uptick in foot traffic to nearby stores, a few temporary hires for program seasons, and a series of local vendors who found new customers through the center's lunch program. The center had not promised to save a town, but it was, quietly, reweaving community threads that gentrification or corporate chain stores had frayed. Of course, success breeds imitators. Larger education brands began to tout maker-esque programs, and a national chain announced a playful science franchise that suspiciously mirrored some elements of the lab. Kailyn didn't panic. She leaned into what made her project distinct: local partnerships, authentic staffing, and a public commitment to sliding-scale access. Critics still barked, especially online, where cynicism spreads faster than curiosity. But by then, the center had tangible metrics: attendance numbers, scholarship allocations, testimonials from local teachers, and, perhaps most persuasive, the kids themselves. A local news crew captured a 5-year-old explaining, with solemn pride, how she'd taught her baby brother to say experiment, and then showed off a paper bridge that held a toy car. The clip went viral in its own small, sweet way. Kailyn's future plans were not bombastic. She toyed with opening a second location in a nearby town with similar demographics. She wanted to start a summer camp focused on environmental science, partnering with local conservation groups to teach kids about the Delaware Bay. She mulled creating an online resource hub for parents, free lesson plans, safe experiment templates, and community forums where local teachers could exchange ideas. But expansion came with caveats. "I don't want to scale to the point where we lose what made us human," she said in a public interview. "If I wanted national reach, there are easier ways. I wanted something that mattered here." The narrative around famous entrepreneurs so often breaks into two predictable arcs: the rags-to-riches billionaire and the influencer-driven vanity project. Playground Lab refused to fit either mold cleanly. Its story is muddled, domestic, and delightfully ordinary. A daughter of Delaware brought back a chunk of her fragmented public life and said, "Let's make a place for children to be people." You can imagine critiques. It's still celebrity-adjacent, it can't entirely escape the optics machine, and public figures always complicate the moral calculus of philanthropy. But you can also imagine a different response, one in which a mother harnesses her platform to create something rooted, thoughtful, and imperfectly useful to her neighbors. On a humid Saturday morning, months after the opening, Kailyn stood in civic play and listened to a small council of children debate whether to build a park or a community garden adjacent to their model town. They argued with the earnestness of small politicians, making case after case for swings or sunflowers. Kailyn sat with her knees tucked under her phone tucked away, a rarity, and smiled at the earnest, messy, human debate. She had launched a business, yes. But more than that, she'd launched a place that treated the complicated business of childhood as if it were important enough to build with care. If you're the type of person who sighs when celebrities try to do good, you're suspicious for a reason. In an economy that prizes optics and fast growth, community-centered efforts can be co-opted and hollowed out. But there's also a stubborn truth: institutions matter. Places where kids feel safe to try and fail can change trajectories. They are not magic, they are scaffolding. Kailyn's Playground Lab is not a cure-all. It won't replace public investment in schools, nor will it erase the structural inequities that shape childhoods. But it demonstrates a slice of possibility, that a person with resources and attention can choose to build something that foregrounds process and community rather than curated outcomes. That she chose her native Delaware, not because it was the trendiest launchpad but because it was home, matters, too. Small places are hungry for intentional investment. A business that centers them with humility can, in time, shift something. And for Kailyn, strapped into the familiar roller coaster of public life, the laboratory offered a way to channel her energy into something concrete. She traded a handful of late-night drama for early-morning construction meetings, and in doing so, quietly shrugged off a narrative that she only knew how to monetize spectacle. Instead, she showed how spectacle can be redirected towards scaffolding. On a final, very ordinary Tuesday afternoon, a little girl walked out of the lab carrying a cardboard crown she'd made in Maker's studio. She grinned at her mother and, with the blunt sincerity of children, declared, "I'm an inventor." The mother laughed, kissed her, and tucked the crown into the stroller. Kailyn, who'd been there that day checking on an inventory shipment, watched them leave and felt something that felt very much like quiet triumph. Good, she thought. Let them invent. Playground Lab, Little Minds, Big Discoveries may be a fictionalized column of exuberant possibilities spun from the real public life of a well-known mom. But the core idea, that play can be designed with dignity and community in mind, is no fantasy. Whether this particular project grows into a national network or remains a beloved local experiment, its arrival in Delaware is a reminder that the future we build for children depends on the choices adults make today. Kailyn Lowry chose to build. Whether you cheer, scoff, or simply watch, you can't deny that, for a handful of messy, brilliant hours each week, something new is being made.